Hello, everyone. Welcome to Breathe with Dr. Patience. And today I'm super excited because I have an awesome guest here and he will be introducing himself to you in a brief second. You know what? If you know me, you always know that my slogan is to smile, to breathe, and to stretch. I have been saying this for a few times, and now everybody sees me and goes like, wow, that's the breathing lady, that's the smiling lady, and that's the stretching lady. They just see me and they get back into position, they fix their posture, and they try to adjust their emotions, their spirit, and their mind so they can keep going. Now, in this day, we have been focusing mostly on women's anxiety because, of course, yours truly is a woman, so it's easy for me to do that. So today, I decided to bring a man, his name in the person of Dr. Steve White. So he is going to be talking to us and sharing a lot about what he knows and how from his personal experiences. So without much ado, I'm going to pass on the microphone to Dr. Steve for him to tell you who he is and his background, and then we'll come back into talking about today's topic. Dr. Steve, please go on ahead and introduce yourself to my audience. Let them know who you are and what you do in this world. Oh, the amazing thing.
I am the blessed husband of Dr. Ruth Bryant White, who is the founder and CEO of B&J, Breaking News Journal, which is a clean TV revolution. That's exactly what it is.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Dr. Steve, so thank you so much for telling us about your beginnings as a 19-year-old who converted and started to know about the Lord and all that. I'm so thankful. So I wanted to bring in this part of the main topic why we're here talking about overcoming stress and anxiety. When growing up, did you 70 years on earth, bless your life and your experiences. I'm sure you have a lot to share. At what age or in what phase of your life did you begin to understand or see that stress was a thing or anxiety was a thing or worry was a thing? Because I'm sure you would not know that if you were a baby or between 0 to 5, you would not know. So at what time did you start to feel or to have a sense that there was something going
on? About the time I started to go to junior college and then moved on into college, I really began to feel stressed as far as finding my own way in the world. Quite frankly, I was spoiled. My parents had enabled me. As a young person, I had a very near-death experience. I was hit by a car when I was 5 years old. I had run out into the street, tried to be careful. I was picking up an arrow that I had shot into the street somehow. And this sports car came zipping around the corner and hit me right in the temple area. The bumper hit me right there. And 9 times out of 10, you get hit there, you're dead.
Yeah.
And I flew quite a ways and I landed. And when I landed, I wasn't breathing. My heart wasn't beating. My father, who had just gotten home from the Navy from the Second World War, he was a dental officer on the Pine Island, which was a seaplane tender in Guam. And he had seen his sister ship, the ship right next to him, get hit by a kamikaze right at the waterline. And the plane went in, blew up, killed everybody on the medical level. But the ship did not sink for some reason. And my father got witness to. he was in religious science. He was a very self-made man, very, very self-centered and strong, tall. So I was I was hit by a car. and they took me to the hospital, and I was 2 weeks in a coma, hooked
Wow.
up to the machine. Right. And the doctors told my folks that I wouldn't make it, to go on ahead and pull the plug and let me die, because I was going to be a vegetable for the rest of my life. And bless their hearts, my folks hung in there. And after 2 weeks, I woke up, and I had to be taught everything all over again. And I went into regular school, and my balance was shot because of all the nerves that had been damaged. And but I didn't feel much stress, because I knew my folks were taking care of me, and they would always take care of me, I thought. So I was spoiled and enabled, and everybody looked at me as poor Steve, who, you know, could have been dead, but came back somehow, some way, some way. And I
I have a
just,
question
I
before
just
you move on.
began.
Before you move on,
Sure.
let me ask this question. So, as we're talking right now, there's somebody listening who has an experience where their child just happened to have something similar, not the same, but so they're trying to thankfully spoil the child, like, oh my goodness, she wouldn't be here or he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the grace of God that he woke up from the coma or she woke up from the coma. So they try to do their best to especially treat this person to be all right. So do you have any parenting tip for parents who were in the place where your parents are? Is there something that you would say to them so they will not be labeled as people, parents spoiling their children? Or is it okay that they did it? Here you are, professor.
Well, it was okay for a while, uh, but they just made excuses for me. I remember when I was going to elementary school, if we had a test and I didn't know anything about the subject, instead of asking my parents, I'd just pretend to be sick, and they'd let me stay home. And they'd enable me that way, you know. And much later on, when I was learning to drive, uh, I remember my first car was an MG, uh, which was a British car that had a real tight shifting pattern, and it was not an automatic. It was a stick shift, so I had to learn how to shift a car. And as somebody who was in recovery as I was, and just finding myself, I'm amazed that I learned how to drive a stick shift. I learned how to drive it pretty well, uh, if I do say so myself. Uh, but my parents, bless my heart, what would I say to parents? I'd say help your child deal with reality, learn how to find their gift, find their calling, uh, help them get in touch with work, like hard physical work, like mowing lawns and washing cars and babysitting. That's typically what young kids do. And I did a lot of that when I was young. That was part of the way of finding my feet, learning how to walk through this world. And uh, the Lord was slow to come. That came later.
Yeah.
Uh,
To,
but
to
but
follow
it
up.
was just surviving for me,
Right.
just learning to survive.
Thank you for sharing that. That parents should do their best to push the children a little bit more out of their, because kids will always test you to see if you will let them lay down in bed. Like you said, you pretend you're sick so you don't take the test. And mommy's heart will go like, oh, my daughter is not well, my son is not well, which is very normal for parents to go like, oh, let's give him a break. He just came out of a coma, right? So during that time when you had the accident and when you got out of coma, what was there therapy at that time? I know it's 65 years ago. Was there therapy for you to overcome the trauma, the stress, or do you remember being afraid of cars or anything like that? I'm just trying to pull out the stress where it's if
Ooh,
there was anything at all.
that's a good question. No, I wasn't afraid of cars. Amazingly enough, uh, I always loved animals and I loved nature. I remember my folks bought me a lot of toys and things when I got back from the hospital. Uh, I had a severely shattered leg, so I had to. I was wearing a cast for a while, and then they cut that off and the cast off, not my leg, thank God, and and yeah, and uh, I learned how to walk around. But I remember loving animals, and I remember my little fish died after a while, and one of my friends said, "Your fish is dead, isn't she?" And I said, "No, she just didn't need her body anymore."
Oh,
And now that's shaking. That's stunning for a kid who just like woke up out of a coma, to have that kind of understanding about life and death and where things go, you know. Uh, I remember that was kind of awesome, to
it
hear
is
that come out of
profound.
my mouth.
It is profound for someone to say that. And as you said, you were in your early years. So people have said that they have out of body experience when they are in coma and stuff like that. Do you remember anything at that time? We have like 10 minutes to wrap up the session. So if you can share anything
No,
that you remember from that part.
no,
No?
absolutely not. The first thing I remember is the very kind doctor cutting the cast off of my leg so that I could walk home and get my gifts. And I remember my little fish, and I remember at that time um, I enjoyed doing things with my fingers. I had an etch a sketch. Do you know what those are?
Yes,
Little,
the red borders. Yeah. It's like a,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So I could draw pictures pretty well with my little etch a sketch. And I also like to play a game where it was a tilty wooden maze, and you try to roll a big BB around through the maze and avoid the holes that were traps, and I played that for hours. And interestingly enough, as I was playing and reading and learning, I also listened to music. I listened to rock and roll back at that time, and I sang along with it. And I also listened to that's odd, thinking of to some old gospel preachers, you know, uh, not necessarily Christians like Billy Graham, but some of the other ones that were like on the fringe of Christianity. So I had learned them, uh, and I remember just listening, just letting it go in one ear and out the other. Didn't really mean much,
Of
but
course.
it was just listening to them and listening to music, you know,
Yeah.
and singing. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Dr. Steve, for giving us this powerful introduction of your early days and who you
sure.
are and what you do in this world. And I'm super excited that we'll come back to part two of this conversation as you have a whole whole wheelhouse of wisdom to share with us on how you have overcome stress in the different stages and aspects of your life. So I'm super excited for this. So
Ooh,
thank you so much for joining us today, and we will
sure.
continue in our next session.